Um, all right. So let's, first the topic of financial planning. As I think about that, as a pastor myself, I did work in the secular world for about 13 years before I became a pastor. And if you're working a secular job, you've some companies have a 401k program. Of course, you've got Social Security that you're paying into. Sometimes you have a pension, and there's other investments that you can delve into. Now, if you're a pastor, um, most of the time churches don't have a 403b set up, which is the equivalent of a 401k for a nonprofit organization. Um, and a lot of pastors have opted out of Social Security. I know I did, with the intention of taking the money that I would have paid into it and setting it aside. Well, those were good intentions. And you've got savings, you've got investments. I invested in a rental property. My brother-in-law has been in the ministry, and that's what he did, and he encouraged me to do the same. So I did that about 25 years ago, and that's turned out well for me. But so anyway, this is a topic that as you look at scripture, I what comes to my mind first is Matthew 6, where it talks about provisions, and it says, "Seek first the kingdom and all his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." God's going to provide. Don't worry about tomorrow. So there's that faith component, and for a lot of us who go into ministry, we're zealous for ministry, and we just kind of assume God's going to provide. Well, the other side of it, there's some practical verses in Proverbs and other places. Proverbs 21:20 says, a wise man saves for the future, right? Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And if you're going to be able to do that, you've got to have some sort of plan to save. And of course, Dave Ramsey has been in the spotlight, and amongst Christians especially, to bring in a biblical perspective about all that, about financial planning. Um, so, so to me, there's a balance between trusting God, providing, and then practically doing some things to plan for the future. So I'm not going to attempt to try to answer that and describe what that balance is. What we are going to do here today is provide you with some resources, and specifically Mike Green, who is a financial planner and an attorney, trained by Dave Ramsey, certified, and then Chad Frank, who recently went through a financial planning certification and works specifically with missionaries and helping them to financially plan for their future. So we're going to start with Mike, and both of these guys, actually we'll start with Mike, and just describe a little bit about your background and why you got into financial planning.
Sure. Thank you, Rick. And hello, all. I am not in San Francisco. I've got to pull that off. I'm in the Mitten in Michigan, where Rick is, where it was seven degrees below zero this morning. So
Yes.
uh, uh, that's where I'm at. But thank you for having me on, and greetings to you all. I'm a Christian, and as Rick indicated, I'm a lawyer. I graduated from Michigan State University, got involved with in the political arena, and then went on to law school in the evening. Came out. Most of my career has been in government relations, but the first couple of years, upon graduating from law school, I was involved with a financial planning firm. Got an opportunity to work at with a couple of governors and some legislators that I immensely respected. Fell in love with that, and then eventually, and along the way, got involved with some administrative work. As I indicated, I had through a governor had went over to the Department of Corrections, did some work with Habitat for Humanity and that arena, but decided to leave bureaucracy and go back to my original roots and into the financial planning. So I've got licenses in a variety of insurance arenas, from property casualty to life, to health, to long-term care, and I've got certification in estate planning and elder law. And why? You know, we're so busy, at least I'm talking from my perspective of getting our career started, moving forward. You know, the concerns are out there with my job duties, et cetera. Sometimes we forget, we neglect ourselves. You know, with the church, you're involved with trying to make sure the budget's there and you've got enough to keep the church open and you got parishioners, et cetera, members. But we sometimes forget about our own backyard. And that in part happened to me. We had a couple of small businesses and I was putting all my eggs in one basket on the assumption that the fruits of our labor would come to roost. We ended up having to sell the business at a tough time in 2008. And it dawned on me, I said, you know, it's just bad planning. I've always wanted to assist people in getting a plan together. That just accentuated that. And so I am a firm believer that try to keep the end in mind and look at where you'd like to go and how you'd like to go about it, what resources you have and how to plan for that end. Now, financial planning is often well, I'm not going to go in this, Rick. I'm jumping ahead, I suppose, beyond the introduction. So when you want me to move into it, if you want to introduce Chad, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, why don't we take a break here and if we'll
Let's
come
do
back
that.
to you and let's have Chad introduce himself. Same kind of thing.
Fine.
Just tell us your background and how you got involved in financial planning and what's motivated you to do that.
Yeah, Chad Frank. I grew up in a God-fearing home, but not a Christian one, and I went to Bowling Green State University to pursue the party scene, but God got a hold of me and got saved at Bowling Green. Wanted to do ministry, but it wasn't an option due to my loans. I come from I say it's an upper lower class family. So schooling was on my own. My parents weren't able to help me with that, which is fine. They did the best they could. But so money was an issue for me, even inhibiting me from going into ministry. But fortunately, because as a physical therapist, that was pretty well paying back in that day, probably is still today. But either way, I was able to get my debt knocked out pretty quickly, and I was finally able to do ministry. And basically, that's really started my journey of really being bent towards finances. But then, of course, it became very spiritual. Honestly, probably my favorite parable of all the Bible is the parable of this the talents. You know, the three men who were given different amounts and yeah, Matthew 25 there. So anyway, that's just really impacted me. The idea of making the most of every opportunity God gives us, that whole idea of stewardship and making the most of what God's given us really resonates with my soul. Yeah, I had an opportunity to do Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey and got to teach that version towards college students. It's called Foundations. And most recently got exposed to the the name is Kingdom Advisors. That's the name of the organization. And they offered something called a certification in Christian financial counseling. And I pursued that because one, that's an interest in my life that's been there for 20 plus years. But also, I stumbled across a few different references that suggests that personal finances is one of the influences of people leaving ministry. And so I thought, gosh, if there's a way that I could address that, keeping people in ministry, I'd love to do that. So that's what got me in. And honestly, I haven't been doing this too long. I've only counseled 2 couples so far. So I'm far from an expert, but I got my certification and it's been a passion of mine for a while. So that's kind of my background.
Great. We're going to go on to Mike to have him tell more of his story and just services that he provides, and then we'll get back to you, Chad. So, Mike.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Rick. Yes, and through Dave Ramsey, I wanted to at least provide some financial coaching. You know, one thing is planning, another thing is helping people pull all those receipts out of a shoebox and try to figure out where they're at and they're in debt, et cetera. And it's easy to do, especially in this day and age. So that certification helps along with the planning. There are 7 steps, and I'm with a couple of individuals. One's a certified financial analyst, which is really the quantitative component of financial planning. The other is a certified financial planning. But a good financial plan is really a conversation between the client and the planner, and because it's really about trust, and it's about knowing who the person is, their family, if there is one, their background, their desires, their hopes, their dreams, their guidelines. So you get an idea as to who they are and how they're approaching their planning. And next is to discuss what goals they may have in terms of retirement, in terms of their work, their movements, etc. And those, of course, these are fluid. But at that moment in time, that snapshot is important in terms of determining what those recommendations might be of going forward. Selecting the goals that you've got, your what ifs, and then analyzing the person's financials at that given time. And that includes their income, their cash flow, their liquidity, their risk management. What are the insurances that they may have on their home, if they own that, on their vehicles, on their any other area, life insurance, etc. Do they have a will? Do they have a will in their trust? Do they have powers of attorney? All those elements that compact and conform to where a person is at any given point in time. And then based upon their goals and where they are, it'd be up to a planner to take that into consideration and advise them as a fiduciary. It's very important that whoever you are working with, if you choose to work with someone, that they understand that they are fiduciary of your responses. This is not a matter of selling products, but matter of planning and counseling you in terms of what recommendations are best to serve you and your family. Putting those recommendations together, and it could be in terms of qualified plans such as 401ks or 403bs. It could be mutual funds. It could be individual stocks. It could be just merely a savings account or a certificate deposit, along with making sure that you draw down your debt and you're moving forward, as Dave Ramsey was saying, hopefully to be debt free. And then at the end of your time frame, have that freedom to do what you wish to do with it, whether give it away, enjoy it, etc. But you work on those recommendations, you implement them, and then it's really critical to have monitoring throughout the year. Circumstances change. You may make a move. You may take another job. You may, if you are willing to buy a ticket, you win the lottery. But if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I know there are enough stories out there that it is critical to begin to take a hard look at where I'm at now and where I'd like to go. And there is never any time that's too late. Whether you're young, you're middle-aged, or you're at retirement, it's still always an opportunity to take a hard look at where you're going and what you're doing, how you go about it.
Yeah, I recently read about a 72-year-old retired pastor who was working with Dave Ramsey to help him in his situation. He only had $32,000 in savings, but he had a house that was worth $600,000. And like you said, Mike, it was all about figuring out, taking that snapshot of his current situation and figuring out a plan moving forward. And that's exactly, and again, Dave Ramsey is real big on getting out of debt, managing your debt.
Yes.
So yeah, it was all about taking this gentleman where he was at and working with him to develop a plan moving forward. So Mike, let me ask you this. How would financial planning be unique or different with past? But by the way, I really like what you said about taking the time to build trust and getting to know the individual. That's really key. Why pastors? What is unique about pastors, and how would you approach their individual situations, whether they're, we've got pastors who've worked in the secular world for a number of years. They transition over. Maybe they have a 401k that they need to manage, and maybe some other savings that they've got and they need to manage. We've got, like you said, middle-aged guys who maybe haven't set anything up yet, or we've got guys in their 60s and 70s who are thinking, wow, I need to do something. I know that's kind of a detailed,
No.
long-winded question.
No. One, God love our pastors. They are maps in many ways, moving forward. But we're also human, and one is there are some options that are available that may not be with respect to folks outside the ministry. Housing Alliance, the Social Security opt-out provision, 403Bs are a little different with respect to income savings for pastors. But unless you have a mega church, you've got a lot of books, you got you're on tape and broadcasting. And kudos to you if in fact you're in that environment, there's a lot of income coming in, or you've just got a small ministry somewhere. What keeps you awake at night? What worries you in terms of, do I have enough, and how much is enough? And no different than going to your physician in terms of your annual checkup, which I would hope you would do. Is what's my blood count? Also, so on and so forth. Keeping, body, mind, and spirit together, and part of that is that financial foundation that you build and that you have when it comes time to retiring or purchasing something else or preparing for an emergency event that happened. And the other is that there are folks in your ministry. If they were to come to you, and there are financial challenges, you would want to help them. The question is, are you helping yourself? And it's like first things first. So pastors, like anyone else, and even sometimes even more so, because you are in effect running a spiritual business, and that income stream may not be as much as one might get in a secular world. It doesn't matter sometimes how much you make, it's how well you manage that. And if you can go to sleep at night knowing that I don't have a lot of debt, I don't have a lot of savings, but I can sleep well because I have a plan and I'm moving forward to it. So
Yeah,
it's a philosophical foundation, and your planner should be your trusted guide and advisor for them.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about the other day was for pastors who, they step down from their leading role of a church, but they still want to be involved. They want to minister. They've discovered who they are, what their gifting is, and they want to be able to focus on that. A lot of pastors, they wear a lot of hats throughout their tenure, but towards the end, they've discovered what they really like to do and are good at. It's sad to think that he steps down from that role and doesn't have the freedom, the financial freedom, to be able to really focus in on the things that he's really good at and can make a difference in.
Well, you're givers. You get your mission is giving and helping. We forget sometimes. Let's help ourselves first.
Right.
Get that squared away.
Right.
It's a poor analogy, but if you go on an airline and they go, hey, if you got children, put that oxygen mask on yourself first, then take, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's critical.
Yep. Okay, Mike, what are some of the most common questions that people ask you when they're looking for a financial planner?
Well, I would
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure, Burke.
Just and it's about the word fiduciary. And I used to think I understood what it meant, but I'm realizing that now that seems to be the definition has changed. Like, you know, in Utah, somebody who was, you know, he was running on pro-life, but he was all for killing babies. I know Vanguard, like just, I don't know how person want to get, but as far as like, I've got money in principal, but when my father died, I put money in Vanguard. And then I've had to talk with the person assigned to me about making sure that, you know, like certain things like DEI is not driving him to invest. But his idea is, well, that's a fiduciary move, Bert, because that's where more companies are going. And I don't like that. So it seems like the word fiduciary is kind of now left in the like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So what type of definition now is being used for fiduciary?
Well, I'll describe it the way I see it, and I think this is the general sense. That is that I'm working for you, not working for me and my commissions. There's a relationship of trust there that whatever it is that I recommend to you is done in your best interest. I'm a fiduciary, I'm a trusted advisor for your assets and your monies. And that is most critical. And that's why a lot of the planning have moved from I'm going to go in. It used to be, as an example, if I were with a major brokerage firm, I may see a lot of those major brokerage firms instruments for investing out there. And why? Because I'm gaining more commission off of that. That's not, and nor should it be, my role. It's not about me. It's about you, Burke, in terms of whatever's in your best interest. I have an obligation to follow that, and I hope that helps.
Well, yeah. Just, I mean, but I guess what I was asking, seems like other people are having like, that's a great definition. And that's what I understood it to be. But then when some people say, well, I think it would be in your best interest if we went ahead and started investing in these companies that don't line up with your values. And I've had to kind of ask him, I said, I don't want money going invested in here, here, and here. And so
no, I get it.
I'm kind of feeling like I'm having to check behind his back rather than trust him. So maybe I just don't have a trust with him. So maybe that's the real question.
Well, there's a trusting relationship. Look, Burke, I know you, and I'd say, hey, look, I've got some great stuff. I'm going to put you in cannabis. I'm going to put you in, you know, and you go, you know, it may be the best money-making thing for you, but if I don't take into your whole behavior, who you are as a person, then I'm not serving you very well. And it's got to go along with your beliefs. To me, that is part of a fiduciary relationship. If that helps. I mean, there are philosophical and ideologies that go along with investing. That's why I say it's as much behavior as it is a quantitative recommendation. But you should treat me as a trusted advisor, and that whatever it is I'm recommending to you is done in your best interest, whether it's the instrument and your risk, or it's the instrument and your philosophy, if that helps. And I don't care who else they are, but say, you know, if there are some social instruments you just don't want to invest in, then the response should be, then we won't go there. We'll find something suitable alternative.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so Mike, back to, that was a great question, by the way. You threw out that term fiduciary, and I was going to ask a follow-up question about that. And so anyway, what are some of the other most commonly asked questions?
Well, you're right, and that was the start off. Are you a fiduciary? What are your qualifications? How do you get paid? You know, what are my costs? Are there tax ramifications? Is it a holistic approach? Do you take into account my charitable giving? Do I have a will? Do I have a trust? How are your fees set up? How do you do your monitoring? Who do you work with? Who's the custodian of my monies? Is it Schwab? Is it someone else? Where are you licensed? Who you're primarily paid for? Do you have Are you beholding to a New York life insurance? Can I look at other investments? Those are the questions that I would recommend that you ask. They're good, solid, upfront questions. And then say, how do you operate? What is your belief? And that's first part of that whole trusting relationship to gain that. And if they can't answer those questions, perhaps it's time to move on to someone else.
Yeah, any of those questions that you want to address regarding yourself personally for this group here? What do you want them to know about you?
Well, I didn't want to, this is not selling me. I will tell you, and I'm always willing to work and for a couple of reasons, especially with pastors. If it's a way to get to heaven quicker, I really want to work with you guys. But in all seriousness, the beauty of working in the financial planning business is to get to know someone, to help them transform their financial lives into something that's positive, that they can walk away with knowing that I have a plan, and to help them fulfill that plan as we move along in their life, and to feel that I am an advisor to them in a trusted capacity. I enjoy working with folks that they come back and they go, I feel much more comfortable, and I feel like I'm going someplace that I've chosen to go in that path. Therein lies the satisfaction. Economically, monies will always come. That's not my primary, but it's honestly a desire to assist others and make them smile at the end of the day, because in the long run, that's my reputation. And that's really who I am, put it that way.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. All right. At this time, any other questions for Mike before we move on to Chad? Okay. Chad, tell us about yourself. You're new to financial planning. You went through a certification program. You've counseled some missionary couples. What's your motivation for getting into this?
Yeah, that's a good question. At the end of the day, the only thing that debt and financial troubles, the effect that they have on individuals is it limits your options. Proverbs 22 talks about, that the borrower is a slave to the lender, and that's the reality. Whatever debt you're in, whatever financial constraints you're in, it just creates bondage. And so I narrow it down to wanting to keep missionaries kind of in the game, but we know that one of the top 3 reasons, some would say it's the number 1 reason, but nonetheless, at the very least, the top 3 causes of divorce is connected to personal finances. And so Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. The connection between a person's personal finances and their heart is almost a 1-to-1. And so, similar to what Mike was just sharing, it's such a sacred space to be able to step into someone's financial situation. Religion and money are the 2 taboos in our world still, that people just don't like to talk about. In this circle, we love to talk about God and religion, but not necessarily finances. So that may be the most sacred, holy of holies, because it's so much connected to your heart. Again, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And so it's a vulnerable spot. It's a sacred spot. And again, it's just a privilege to be in those spaces. So that's what I kind of get out of it. But functionally, I know that debt and financial constraints just limit a person from being who they were created to be, being on mission as much as they would desire. Yeah, like I said, it does nothing but limit limit you. So I love Dave Ramsey, but I'm not a Dave Ramsey person. He's maybe a pinch more conservative than I am financially, but my goodness, even his staple course, Financial Peace University, that's the aim for each person, just to have peace with their finances. It's like that just brings a lot of life that is lacking in so many people's
Yeah.
financial situations. So yeah, that's the why behind why I do what I do. It's a selfish desire to get into sacred spaces, but also a desire to free people to pursue what God has them and not be constrained by money.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Religion and finances being two of the most difficult things to talk about with people. And so to be somebody who is trustworthy, you build that trust with another person. How do you go about doing that? I mean, what was the name of the organization where you got your training?
Kingdom Advisors. I put a
Kingdom
link in the
Advisors.
chat. I don't know if I had restrictions there or not, but potentially all of you guys have that
Okay.
link chat
Yeah.
box. But
Yeah.
but nonetheless, yeah, that's where I did my training. And
Did they talk about how to do that, how to build trust, how to enter into those conversations?
they did. It was actually the first half of the course was just about counseling. It had nothing to do with money.
Mhm.
Which was brilliant.
Yeah.
As a minister, I think it was clear I'm a missionary. So I benefit from people's generosity. And yeah, I just that's I guess another secret for me. I know that we are created in God's image, and what kind of image are we created in? Well, John 3:16 says that God so loved the world that he gave. We serve and we're made in the image of a giving God. And so if we can free up people from the constraints of greed and honestly poor choices, they get to emulate their creator that much more and live in the freedom and the expression of who they are designed to be and who they're designed to emulate. So anyway, I tangented there, but that's another part of my MO.
Yeah. Well, Chad, in the beginning, I talked about, the balance between, trusting God to provide versus, practically making some plans for your future financially. What would you say to somebody involved in ministry who says, well, I'm just going to trust God. He's promised to provide.
Yeah, that's not a foreign concept. Honestly, those that usually say that, usually have a good grounding in scripture, at least a stated grounding in scripture. And so it's fortunate that the Bible does make a case for both, as you started our time off with. That is the very thing. So definitely would start off with scripture. It tends to follow just Proverbs. If you just read Proverbs, it's hard to get around that. But even Jesus talking about, man, the wisdom of the builder who starts building, or the king who goes off to war without counting the cost. And so anyway, it's all over the place, but most express it in Proverbs. So anyway, that's the first. But then if I know the person well enough, I just honestly like to get to pragmatics of, oddly, I go to 1 Corinthians 7. 1 Corinthians 7, as a lot of us know, Paul talks about how in a certain light, it's better to be single. But he's just talking about pragmatics. It wasn't inherently more spiritual to be single, but your attention is divided when you're married. And similar with finances, if your finances are all over the place, where you have to deal with this, that, and the other thing that someone debt-free doesn't have to deal with, your attention is divided. And even if you're not necessarily, head over heels with money, there's some ramifications for ignoring it. If you're not experiencing it now, you will. And so just on a pragmatic level, try to walk that person through. Yeah, it's helpful that I'm a dinosaur in college ministry, so they can kind of have to take my word for it. Yeah, the day is coming where finances are going to be a major part of your, at the very least, weekly, if not daily, decisions.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Chad, is there anything else that you would like to share to this audience?
No, like I said, I'm more of a one-on-one Q&A kind of a guy, so I don't necessarily have big broad strokes to paint, minus what I've already shared. But yeah, I definitely love it because, again, it gives me a chance to be in intimate spaces and, Lord willing, mold people more into their creator.
Okay. All right. Well, Dave or Burke or Greg, Evelyn, do you guys have any questions for Chad?
Nope, we see a hand.
Need to unmute there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question. You know, I'm 72 and I'm partially retired. And so one of the questions that in my mind is how long to keep working on a part-time basis. We got advice from a financial advisor, and his thought was, well, you should be prepared to live until age 96, which was new to us. So one question I have is that normal in the financial world? Secondly, a good goal. Secondly, I think that some of our financial goals are obviously cultural, in that if I think about many cultures for millennia, people were cared for by their children in old age. And that was not something that was expected, that you would care for yourself or that you were even had the ability necessarily to save up money until you lived to age 96 or whatever. And so, you know, we have 6 children who are still alive. And so I guess that's kind of the question in my back of my mind is how much should I depend on them? How much should I just keep working? You know, I don't want to be a burden on my children, but on the other hand, it might be good for them in some ways to care for their children. Maybe God's will. So those are some of the questions that go through my mind. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, either one of you.
Mike, you can take a stab first, or
Yeah, it's a very good question. And there's not an immediate answer I'm going to give you, Dave, but I think it's worth delving into some conversations that are, you know, irrespective of people living to 96 doesn't mean that they'll work that long, by either capacity, capabilities, or even interest. I think it's a matter of sitting down with you, and you're married. If I didn't ask, I'm sorry. I don't mean to intrude. Okay. Yeah, your spouse, and have a good conversation with that advisor and take a look at the overall picture, what assets you got, what you like to do, and whether or not you could stop right now, what income you have based upon your desires and your goals, or work as long as you want based on things you'd like to do. And the other would be is to that conversation about your philosophy with respect to either providing for your kids or having your kids help, but that's a conversation with your children. And I think it's, you know, it's an important one, but it's got to be tactful and understanding and kind of laying things out. And but there's got to be some thinking going along with that, and kind of doing some drilling down and being honest and reflective and knowing a point that I'll work up until then, and then let's just take a break and enjoy it, as opposed to this sense of urgency or feeling I've got to work. Now, if you enjoy it and you like it, I'm 70 and I still enjoy working. You know what I mean? And but I'll do it because I enjoy it. But you may not be able to travel the world at first class. That's okay. You know, if that's the reality of it, enjoy what you've got and where you're going. But it would be a conversation with your spouse, with your advisor, and with your children, and then begin to plan that out.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah,
that
and
helps.
Dave,
Thank you. That's helpful.
Janelle and Andrew will be taking care of us, not you. We already talked to them.
And you know who your friends are, okay?
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
already-
Just
we
Mike,
already
so you
took
know,
care.
Dave's son is married to Greg's daughter.
Ah, okay, I see.
Sorry.
Didn't
Just
see
this
it.
fall. Yeah, just this fall. So
Well, I'm sorry you got ambushed. That's
I appreciate that, Mike. That's a good some good thoughts.
Yeah, he totally nailed it. Because I was gonna say the only thing that's really resonating with me is expectations.
yeah.
Because your kids are just as much influenced by the culture as anyone else.
Mhm.
So they may have unspoken expectations of, well, what I see around me is individuals taking care of themselves, or maybe they do understand a little bit more of a historical and honestly probably more biblical precedents of no, we want to take care of mom and dad. It would just be good for them to see where expectations lie so that there's no because people weren't bummed out. My understanding, people weren't bummed out to take care of their parents however many years ago because that was just expected. But now all of a sudden we live in a culture, like you said, is like, oh, you're supposed to take why am I need to take care of my parents? I think it's very ungodly thought, but that's
Amen.
influence of the culture. And so,
Hmm.
but we need to recognize that, and it's awesome that you do recognize that. That's honestly half the step.
Well, I'll jump in too. Kind of like I'm 68, and I'm not looking at. I mean, I feel just energetic. I would like to be a little more free locally, so to visit some of our church plants here and overseas. So with Barbara, um, the men on my side of the family usually live to about the mid 70s. The women on Barbara's side of the family live to late 90s. So she comes from a family of long livers. We have 6 sons, and I sat down with them actually this Christmas, and I said, I don't even know how to begin this conversation, but it's going to happen. I will probably die first, and we got to start talking about how your mother is going to be cared for. And so we've just kind of gotten the ball rolling. I'm not on Social Security. I do have enough quarters. I'm not going to get a lot, but I do have enough to draw from. So and then I have. So yeah, I'm just trying to think about. Okay, I mean, I do think I'm gonna live past the mid 70s just because my lifestyle and the fear of the Lord prolongs life. I mean, the Lord could take me out tomorrow, for some reason, but that's what I'm kind of thinking through as far as how will Barbara be cared for, and what'll be prepared, and just even just yeah. I think we're on a good plan, but I think hearing y'all, I realize I don't have that trust with the guy from Vanguard, and so maybe I need to do some investigating as far as maybe finding another financial planner that I could get some just a better maybe a sense, an intuitive sense that I trust in. Yeah.
Burke, if I may, just by virtue of you coming on, what was evident was it's important to have communication, to begin to discuss it. That's the start.
Yeah.
I have a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, one of the things I see, it's not only mostly in my congregation, and so I guess this is a double full question. One of the things I see a common issue is as people are entering into retirement, one of them is I'm shocked at thinking, oh yeah, they're fine financial, and then turns out they're not, and how to advise them. Second thing I've seen throughout family and everything is after the parents are gone, there something happens where there's a terrible falling out between all the kids over the dividing of the empire, as it were. I guess the real question is what's the best way to avoid that? How do you help your kids not get into a major battle over your property? Do you understand my question?
If you don't mind, Chad, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Certainly, Steve, in terms of estate planning, of course, the foundation is how did you raise your children? Which I'm assuming, if you have them, you're raising them well.
Mhm.
But I think I'm working through my mother who's 90, lives in Virginia. And dressing her obituary, and I've explained to the kids and where it's at, what the assets are. I'll be her trustee, but it's the conversation you have eventually with your children at the age that's appropriate as to what you have, how you're going to divide it up, put it in writing, etc. So some things are private, but try not to have any surprises, and perhaps an open letter left at your passing that indicates how much you love your children. And you would hope that what they see is disposed of has been done in an equitable manner.
Mhm.
What's interesting is it Greg or Gregory?
Yeah, either's fine.
Rick, what I was going to mention too, and Greg kind of brought up, is one of the things is a possibility for churches, your ministry, is to provide a financial literacy course. Maybe as a sidebar, and just discussing the whole issue of planning, financial literacy, things to look for as a service to your congregation. And that might be helpful because we don't see it in the schools. And I think it's critical that people understand how significant the issue of, one, not running out of money, shocked, oh my gosh, what just happened, and there's that whole disbursement.
Yeah, the same thing, Mike, with Greg's question. It made me think about, the pastor's role. How much should the pastor from the pulpit talk about finances and the need for planning to avoid some of those pitfalls down the road?
Stewardship, is it not?
Stewardship. It is stewardship.
And blend that in. And
right.
That's a
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah, and a lot of churches use Financial Peace University, Dave Ramsey's course, but I think there's room here for pastors to think about personally, taking some responsibility to address these issues. I don't know what you guys think.
Rick, I'll tell you, and I'll jump in real quick. And Chad's brought up too is, Dave Ramsey has a lot to offer. I may not agree with everything; he's pretty hardcore, but he's planted the seed that is evolved, and that's a healthy thing. But I've looked at a number of financial literacy courses, and if ever of you want to chat about potential opportunities to engage those particular courses that are already out there, I'd be happy to do so. One is because I'm on a parochial school board, and we're talking about implementing a financial literacy course there. So there are options that you can have and have people trained to actually provide that to your congregation.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, we try to keep these platform calls around an hour, and we're approaching that time. So what I wanted to do is make sure we have contact information for both Chad and Mike, and that Evelyn has those and can send those out when this gets posted. So do we need to have Mike put his contact information into the chat?
Yeah, if you guys could just do whatever.
Yeah, if you could, I think you already have Chad's. But if not, go ahead and put those in.
Okay.
And then if you're watching this video, it'll be in the description.
Yeah. Will either of you, Chad or Mike, have any final words that you are like, oh yeah, I need to say this as we wrap it up here?
No, one quick, well, Chad, go ahead.
The only thing, which I think every financial speaker will say this, the best time to start all these things is 20 years ago, followed by today. So if you're hearing this, I'm sure there's some backlashing going on, like, oh man, wish I coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
Yeah, just start today.
But don't let fear overcome you. Still keep hopeful, because no matter what you have, you can plan, and the good
Yeah.
Lord, I know will help us. Lastly, Rick, I was going to mention that, and we've explored some potential opportunities. If you've got associations or you've got a group, that perhaps even through that group could be set up a qualified plan, or other opportunities in which to bring income into your association or your churches. So maybe another discussion point at some further time. Otherwise, it's been a real pleasure, and thank for all of you for what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you too for being willing to come on and talk about this and share your experiences and your knowledge. It's a topic that I think needs to be addressed more in our churches, and certainly with our pastors. So thank you for this initial conversation and being willing to participate in it.